Hi there. Today we will talk about another React core concept that is called module. So, what is the module and how we can use them? So, let's check out what is a module. Here I can see that in our app.js file I create two functions. One is a app component or app function which will be used as our JSX component, and another one is a regular function that we use inside that app component. So if normally what we do that we separate every component into a separate file. So when we create every component in separate file, that file is called a module. Let's check out how can we create a module file. We have a get user file, get user function. We will move this function into a separate file and create a module. So for that I am in source folder, create a file called inside component folder, see components, create a file called get users.js. So inside component folder I created a file called get users. Now I am moving this get user component into my get user file. Now I have to export this file. So if I just export this file, export and import that file into my React application, if I save my file, I can see that my get user files output appears in my DOM. So what we have done there, that we just remove the get user function into a separate file. This is called a module. So there are two type of modules. Let's understand about module a little bit deeper. In JavaScript or in our programming, we have in JavaScript or TypeScript we have two type of modules. One is called CommonJS module and another is ES6 module. When we create our React application, we use Node, and by default Node application use the CommonJS module, and in CommonJS module we use exports and module exports or modules.exports command to export a file, and require function to import that module into another module. But here we are using React application. So in React application we use ES6 module, and ES6 module have keywords like export or export default to export a module, and import command, import keyword to import a module. Now when we create this function, we use the export keyword to export a module, and in our app component we use import command or import keyword to import the module in our application. So let's learn import or export or ES6 module little bit deeper. ES6 module, when we create a module, we must have at first export and then import. So we can export a module two ways, either name export or a export default. Here when we create this export this function, we use the export keyword. This function or this export is called name export. Let's check out how can we use export default. For that we have to remove the export keyword and just export default and function name get users. Now if we export a function as an export default, then we have to import this way. Instead of angle bracket, we have to remove this angle bracket and just call this similar way with as a regular component. So if I save my files, I can see that the export works as it was before. So the export and export default has various ways we can use. For example, let's see some example here. We can import an export module in two ways. Either we can use a regular way as we speak there, as we saw in our example, and this is another way we can export module. So let's check out this second one. So this is the first way to use an export default module. Let's check out another way for export default module. Comment out this line and make this one in angle bracket as this as it was a regular export name export style, and just enter a keyword called default as. Now default as get user, that means we convert our default export to name export. Now if I save our files, I can see that still it works as expected. So if we have export keyword or export default function, we can use in two methods. Either we can use a regular way, or we can convert our default export into a name export. Okay, let's understand how many ways we can use export commands. So for that, remove the export command, command out this line, add export keyword. So now we are trying to understanding the export keyword. So if I go to my file, this time this command will not work, because this command only work when it is export default. So we cannot use this command, so we have to use this line or this way. Say if I save my file, I can see my export is working. We can use another way for name export component. This is the called while component. For that, I have to remove this line. Everything as my components, and then I have to call here my components dot get users, this way. So for that I have to comment out our first way. Now you can see that this is the same effect as we use that curly bracket style. So we can use when we use export command, we can use this way or this way, and when use this way we have to use the prefix in our with our component when we invoke our JSX function, and when we use name export default, then we have this two way we can use. Let's check out how can we use mixture both command. So I am exporting this file and this component, and export default this component again. That means this is the name export and this is the export default. So if I go to my file, I can use either this way, command out, remove this line. I can use this way. So when I am using this syntax, that means I am using the name export features, name export name export. So, and if I use this line, that means I remove the curly brackets. That means I am using the export default method. So, and we can use both method in the same time. For that, I can use export default. Actually, comment out this line. I can use name export as a export default. That means get users, and now I am using another name export style. That means in curly bracket we have to use the get users. It will works as this will work as export default, and this will work as a name export. But the problem is that we use the same function. One use export and another use export default. So there is just two name that is same, but we cannot allow or we cannot use same name for two functions. So I have to use change one of them. So I can change this one. For example, remove the gets. If I use get users, now if I save my files, it works fine, because export default, when you use export default, we can put any name, whatever we like. So if I use remove the gets, that why now two variables are different variables. But if we try to use let's prefix with get, but try to use modify this line, it will not work, because name export must be same name as the function has. So we cannot use different name here. So I have to use the same name to access the function, get user function or get user component. But the problem is that both has the same name. We know that two variables cannot have the same name if that used with constant keyword. So how can we do that? How can we solve this problem? We can rename this one as users. The as keyword is used to rename a function. It is actually the JavaScript feature. So if now I have two variables, one is the get users and another is users. So if we see that get users available there, but it will not be any problem, because this is renamed to this users. So I can use the get user. If I save my file now, I can see it works fine. Or I can use remove the get command. It will use this syntax. So we understand that how can we use export, name export, or how can we use export default in various way. When we importing or exporting a module, we have two type of module. One is default module and another is custom module. In my example, just remove this module for simplicity. Remove this line, uncomment this line. Get users. Actually, this line will be get users. When we try to import any module, if that module is created by ourselves, this is called custom module or user module. So in that case, we always have to use the prefix relative path or absolute path for our component file. As you can see, I am using that / then my folder name, because I am currently using this is the F file, that means this file, and the get user files, get users.js file is available in same directories, component folder, and inside there. That means I have to go to my same current file, then go to my component folders, and then the file names. But if we use the global or global module like React, suppose if I try to use import React from React, when we try to use any module that is not created by ourselves, we downloaded or we use any third-party module, then we do not need any extra prefix or anything. Just name the module name and use and import as export import or whatever the module allow our whatever feature or whatever export feature enable in that module. React, we can use React as a export Y, or we can use this Y as a name export Y too. If we command out this line, it will work fine. So we understand that we can use, when we use user created module, we must use a relative path or absolute path, then the full module. But when we use any third-party module, we always use just the module name, and then we import which way the module allow us to import that module. If it is a if that module allow us to use the export directly export default Y, then we have to use export default syntax, and we have to import in export default Y syntax. And if that module allow us to import as a name module, then we have to use the name module syntax Y. So this was the two factor how can we use user created module or third party module. Now let's understand another thing, like let's comment out this line. We have only this module. React is a module that is not export default. Actually, React is a name export module. In React library, all the module or all the all the functions are export, or that means name export. So we have to use this syntax. But if we try to this syntax, it will also work in our application. How why this syntax works? Let's see a reason. So we can see that it has two reasons to because of actually this syntax. This syntax is identical to this syntax as we covered in our example. So this syntax works because the first reason, JavaScript do not check the type for our syntax, React syntax. So that is the reason it works fine, but only throw error when it in runtime or compile time. And the second reason is that we use the bundler like Webpack, and Webpack is smart enough to understand which module is name export and which module is export or export default. So Webpack automatically by default export default if there is no single export default available. So that is the reason Webpack works behind the scene for React name export file. And when we use TypeScript, in TypeScript we cannot use this syntax. We must use this syntax. because TypeScript does not allow to TypeScript always check the type. So that is the reason when we use TypeScript we have to use this syntax instead of this syntax. Let's go to our project. We understand what is the name export and what is the export default, and let's check out another features that is called re-export. For example, if I remove these two line, now actually I am not using that. Here I am using one module from our on file. I am importing one module from our single file which is inside this folder. For example, if I had multiple component into multiple folder or multiple file like this way. Suppose I have a folder called library, and inside that library I have a component folder, and inside that folder I have a file or I have a module. So if I have 4 or 5 modules, then my code will be, I have to import them this way. This is if we try to use multiple import files. Like here I am using only 4, but what happens in our real life scenario, we use lot of imports. So if we use 10 of imports, then this file will be so much messy. So we have a technique called re-exporting. We can remove this messy syntax with just like this syntax. This technique is called re-exporting. So let's check out. Let's see in action. For that, I am not going so much deep nested folder. I am using in common. I am creating another file or another function in our component folder. So I am creating another file. This file is named get users. Actually users already have, so I use get products.js. So create React function, or actually I can copy from the other function, like from here. Remove the export default, just get users, name it get products. So I have two modules. One is the get user, another is get module user. Let's create another one. New file, get comments or comments.js. All the comments file or the review will be available here. So I can copy from this module and paste there and rename that get comments. Also update there. Now I have 3 modules. One users, another products, another for comments. Now if we try to import that these 3 modules, how can we do that? We have to import get, actually capital name get, we export them as a name export command. So we cannot in user we have the export default, so remove that export default. We have only the export name export command, so we cannot use this syntax. We must use in curly braces. So this is our valid syntax. If I save my files, I can see that working. So now import products and comments. So how can we do that? We can copy paste this line, get products, actually name will be changed also here, and get COMMEN comments, and I have to change that. Now call this product here, get products and get comments. If I save my file, I can see that I imported 3 modules. Though these modules are very simple, just a p tag. So we are understanding how can we simplify these 3 modules with a single line. So for that, I have to create a single file inside a component folder, name it index.js, and this index.js export everything from at first product.js, then duplicate these 2 lines, and this will be get product users, and this will be get comments. Now this is the key secret or trick that we can simplify our this messy syntax with import everything from components. Now I have to import these 3 component name here, get users, get comments, get products. Now I can comment out this line. If I save my both files, I can see it still works as before. So this is a if I have 10 import from 10 different location, in this scenario I use same location, that means component folder, that is it is little bit simpler. But if I use nested component or nested folder, and I use instead of 3 I have to use 10 or 20, then my full program or full module, this app module will be messy. So by using this simple application or simple trick, we use all the module into this module or this folder or this file, and then we import from this module, that means index.js file. Actually this is identical as index.js file. When we try to import from any file, any folder, and inside that folder if we have index.js file, then we can ignore that index component or index syntax, because by default React or Node module always use the index file if that is available. So now I cover all the import or export feature in React applications. Hopefully we will understand how we can use name export and how to import name export component, and how to use export default, and how can we use export default component. And the last thing is the re-export trick.